Good morning, friends. A warm welcome to all. Today, the webinar is on TDS and TCS provisions under GST. The concept of TDS and TCS is familiar under direct tax laws. TDS is a mechanism for advance collection of tax, while TCS is levied and collected on the sale value of certain commodities when referred to the Income Tax Act. However, the concept of TDS and TCS under indirect tax mechanism (GST) is the same as contained in the Income Tax Act. This concept is brought under indirect taxation for the first time since 1st October 2018. GST lawmakers have incorporated the concept of TDS and TCS under GST law to track the business transaction and generate revenue. And for this, we have our guest speaker, CA Tarun Arora ji. He is a fellow member of ICI and a commerce graduate from Delhi University, a student of GST and researching on the subject since 2015. A regular speaker at various forums such as certificate course on GST conducted by ICI, CP seminars conducted by various branches of ICI, and study circles, associations to discuss various aspects of GST. He consults organizations on latest and tricky aspects of GST and regularly represents clients before the revenue departments at various levels. And we have with us none other than CA Vivek Khurana ji, founder of CS Sansaar, and his name is just enough for the CS. Now, I would request him to welcome him and give him a welcome address. So please.
Thank you very much, Stuti ji. CS Tarun Arora ji, speaker of today's webinar, CS Stuti Mahajan ji, all other respected members of the profession, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, a warm welcome to all of you at this early morning or Sunday morning. And today's very important webinar, TDS and TCS provision under GST. My sincere thanks to Tarun ji for giving his valuable time to speak on this topic. Earlier, we have organized a webinar on GSTR 9 and 9C by the Tarunji, and he speaks very well, and he had solved many queries at that time also. And today's topic regarding this, Stutiji told us that TDS and TCS, even we have recorded one video by Stutiji itself. And today we will discuss about the registration aspects, return aspects, and the legal aspects, because many confusions are there, when to deduct, where to deposit, and many things are there regarding this TDS provision. Government brings new provision under this GST, and every time I said, instead of simplification day by day, it's more complications are there. So but yes, we have to do, and speaker will guide us. So now over to Tarunji. So once again, my sincere thanks to Tarunji. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Vivek ji, Stuti ji, and the entire team of CS Sansaar to give me this opportunity to deliberate on the topic of TDS and TCS provisions under the GST Act. Now, without wasting any further time, I will be starting the discussion. We all are familiar with TDS and TCS provisions under the Income Tax Act. And the basic objective of both these provisions in the Income Tax Act is to ensure two basic things. One is early collection of taxes, so that the government can receive cash flows before they actually become due. So generally our advance tax due dates are at the end of a quarter or in the mid of the quarter. For April to June, 5th of June, then 5th September, 15th of December, and 15th of March. But TDS are deposited every month. So there is a regular inflow for the government to ensure that they can meet their targets or they can meet their monthly expenditure. Similar provisions are now incorporated in the GST Act, in which the government will be able to collect TDS and TCS from certain categories of suppliers. The basic difference between the TDS and income tax and GST provision is that under Income Tax Act, we have various categories of TDS, 194A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. There are various categories in which the TDS provisions have been divided. But under GST, there is only one specific category. Either you fall in that category or you do not fall in that category. या तो आपका TDS कटेगा या नहीं कटेगा. And who has to deduct the TDS are also very limited category of person. Under income tax, it is very wide. All individual whose turnover is more than 1 crore rupees are liable, or who are liable to tax audit. Company, irrespective of turnover, partnership, irrespective of turnover, are required to deduct TDS. But in GST, the supplier or the person who has to deduct the TDS is very small. So one of the basic objective is to ensure that there is early collection of taxes. And the second basic objective in the entire process is to ensure an audit trail. In case there is a person who is not filing his return, who is not depositing his taxes on a regular basis, because now I have deducted TDS or I have collected TCS, I am reporting his GST into the department. The department gets a data on which they can work upon that how many GSTians are actually filing their returns. For example, TDS has been deducted on rupees 10 lakh rupees. However, he has filed a return of rupees 5 lakh rupees. So this creates an audit trail for the GST department to ensure that there is a proper synchronization everywhere. Now I will be taking through my slides. Just give me a second. So basically our discussion will be divided in two parts, TDS and TCS, and I will be trying to cover each and every aspect related to these provisions. Starting with TDS provisions. So basically we have only two provisions. One is section 51 and rule 66. So only two provisions are there in the GST Act which deals with tax deduction at source. Now let us start the provision. The very first question that arises.
Not able to see the PPT.
Just give me a second, sir.
Yes, perfect. Yes. You can do F5 full mode. Exactly.
The first and the very basic question is, who is required to deduct TDS? जब हम TDS की बात कर रहे हैं तो पहला क्वेश्चन तो यही आता है किसके ऊपर ये प्रोविजन एप्लीकेबल है? Which are those categories of persons who are required to deduct TDS? So in section 51, they have specified three categories. In section 51, they have specified three categories, and in the fourth category, they have retained a power. So section 51 में three categories have explicitly been written, and they have a power in category D that they can notify any person who is required to deduct the TDS. Till date, only 6 categories are liable to deduct TDS under GST Act. The first category is the department or establishment of the central government or state government. So any department of central government or state government, what are these departments? Defense, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of External Affairs, any kind of ministry, you can refer that it is a department or an establishment of a central government. So all these are covered in the first category. So any ministry, any secretariat is liable to deduct TDS. When they have to deduct, we will study. Abhi we are only concentrating on the aspect who is required to deduct the TDS. When he has to deduct, what is the amount of deduction, what is the rate of deduction, that we will deal separately. The who is required to deduct the TDS. When he has to deduct, what is the amount of deduction, what is the rate of deduction, that we will deal separately. Who is required to deduct the TDS. When he has to deduct, what is the amount of deduction, what is the rate of deduction, that we will deal separately. Who is required to deduct the TDS. Vivekji, someone is actually, now it's okay. The second category is the local authority. So any authority which is referred or defined as a local authority under the GST Act are required to deduct TDS. Then any governmental agencies. These are the three which are explicitly written in the Act itself. After this, the government has notified three categories. And three categories are any authority or board set up by an act of parliament or state legislature. So if any organization, any authority, any board is created, for example, Delhi Jal Board of Delhi Jal Board, or for example, any electricity board. So all these are boards created by either the central government or the state government. So in case these are formed by central and state government and they have 51% or more participation in the equity, or they control more than 51% of that board, then they are also required to deduct the TDS. The fifth category is any society established by state government, central government, or a local authority. And the last, it is public sector undertaking. So these are the 6 categories in which they are required to deduct TDS. The good thing is that none of the private players are required to deduct TDS as on the specified date. When we stand today, none of the private entities, an individual or proprietor, a partnership firm or a private limited company or a public limited company, which is not a public sector undertaking, are not required to deduct TDS. So the applicability of TDS is very limited. But once we enter the government organization or the governmental sector, then the applicability is almost on all the organizations. However, there are certain exceptions. The first exception is that Ministry of Defense is not required to deduct TDS except for specific authorities. They have specified that they have to deduct the TDS. So there is an Annexure A with notification 50/2018, wherein they have specified that these entities or these authorities under the Ministry of Defense are required to deduct TDS. So first they gave a blanket exemption that none of the departments of defense are required to deduct TDS. Then they added that except these. So some categories, some authorities under Ministry of Defense are required to deduct TDS. Then they said a transaction between PSU to PSU. So when I am deducting, I am a PSU, I have to deduct TDS. So if I am deducting TDS of another PSU, then the government says it makes no sense. We are dealing amongst ourselves. It is a government or owned or controlled organization. So we don't need to complicate the burden. So they said transaction between two PSUs, one PSU with another PSU is also exempted from TDS provision. And lastly, they said that any transaction amongst these, any of these, say Ministry of Defense with a PSU or a society with a local authority. So any transaction between these six is also exempted from deduction of TDS. So they are not required to deduct TDS. So in total, we have 6 categories: any ministry or department of central or state government, local authority, governmental agencies, authority with 51% controlling power, then a society established or registered by a central government, and lastly a PSU. Then there are 3 exceptions: Ministry of Defense, PSU with PSU, and any transaction among these 6 are outside the purview of Section 51. So now we understand that this provision is applicable to a particular set of persons. The next issue arises: I am liable to deduct TDS. Now what I have to do? So there are 4 things that you have to do. One is you have to obtain a registration. And what will I do after obtaining the registration? I will deduct TDS. So once I am liable for deducting TDS, the first and the very basic step will be to obtain registration. As soon as I obtain registration, the next step will be to deduct TDS. Then how we will deduct, we will understand in the coming slides. The third aspect is, once I have deducted the TDS, I will deposit the TDS. And lastly, issue a certificate to the person for whom I have deducted the TDS amount. So these are the 4 broad categories in which we will be discussing the entire concept of TDS. That is the registration concept, the deduction concept, the return filing concept. Starting on with the registration of a taxpayer. So there was a PSU client who said, sir, I already have a GST registration because I am supplying certain goods and services. So I already have a GST registration. So I don't need an additional registration as a tax deductor. I will use my normal GSTN number for deducting taxes. Or he said, or I already have a TAN number under GST Act. I already have a TAN number under the GST Act. So I will use that TAN number for deducting TDS under the GST Act. The law says that no, sir. Whether you already have a GST number for your normal supplies or not, or you have a TAN number or not, you will have to file a fresh registration application. You will have to file a fresh registration application, and you will have to obtain a separate registration. You will be granted a separate GSTN as a tax deductor. So even if I am registered in Delhi as a supplier, I will be able to file only GSTR 1 and 3B or any other form which may be notified. But I cannot file my TDS returns. The GST TDS returns cannot be filed. So in simple words, you will have to obtain a separate registration for a tax deductor. So in case you are liable to deduct TDS, you will have to file a fresh application with the department, and you will be granted a fresh registration, a fresh GSTN number to deduct the TDS. Then another category is, the other aspect is that there is no threshold limit for a tax deductor. Under Income Tax Act, we see there are threshold. There may be a threshold. For example, a company is required to deduct with the zero threshold, but an individual or a HUF are given a threshold of say 1 crore, or they are required only if they cross a particular parameter. Under GST, once you are selected as a tax deductor, once you are covered in those 6 categories which you have already discussed, then the threshold limit is not applicable. You will have to obtain the registration on the very first day. जैसे ही मुझे पता चला कि I am liable to deduct TDS, I should go and obtain the TDS registration without any threshold limit. Secondly, I should fill my application in form number REG07. So I will file my registration in form REG07. The application form is similar to that of the normal registration. There is no difference between the two registrations, except that you are given an option. The normal registration is not possible without a PAN, but a TDS registration is possible without PAN number, but you must have a TAN number under the Income Tax Act. So this is the only difference. Otherwise, the entire form and the contents are almost similar. The only additional option that is given to you under this form is that if there are many government organizations or departments which do not have a PAN number because they don't have any earnings, they only do. The budget is allocated to them and they are only doing expenditures. So since they don't have any income to report, they don't obtain PAN number. But since they are incurring expenditures, they are required to obtain TAN number for income tax purposes. So the same concept has been taken over under the GST regime also. And they said, if you don't have PAN, then you quote your TAN number. And on the basis of TAN number, we will allot you a GST and tax deduction number. I filed my application, and after filing my application, I will be issued a registration certificate in form REG06. I'm not going into the integrities of the registration process because it is similar to what we are already doing. The only distinction is that if you don't have a PAN, you can use a TAN number also for the registration. So only this is the exception. Otherwise, it is straightforward. Section 24 mandates that every tax deductor has to obtain registration without threshold limit. There is no capping of turnover or the limits. You have to obtain registration on the very first day. So now I was required to deduct TDS because I was falling in one of the 6 categories. I have also obtained the registration. Now the issue arises. Now I am a registered TDS deductor. But when I have to deduct the TDS? So the law says that you have to deduct TDS at the time of payment or credit to the supplier. So मुझे TDS कब deduct करना है? When I am paying the amount to the supplier or I am crediting the amount to the supplier. Even a book entry of payment will be deemed to be a trigger point to deduct TDS. But every time when I am liable to deduct TDS, मुझे payment के साथ एक चीज और क्या देखनी है? That those payments should relate to a contract, the aggregate value of which exceeds 2,50,000 rupees. So there must be a contract. The value of that contract must exceed 2,50,000 rupees. And if I am paying amount for that particular contract, then I am required to deduct TDS. So there are 3 things that I need to check. One is whether there is a contract. Yes. What is the value of contract? More than 2,50,000 rupees. Yes. You are liable to deduct TDS at the time of payment or credit. If the value of contract is less than 2,50,000, then you are not required to deduct TDS. We will understand this 2,50,000 limit with the help of some illustrations also. Now, the another important aspect in this entire discussion is that when we talk about the supplier, it includes both the normal supplier, that is a person who is registered as a normal taxable person, and it also includes a composition tax registered person, a person who has obtained registration under section 10. So if I'm a composition registered person, even then the government or the department is required to deduct the TDS. So there is no exception between a normal and a composition supplier. Both these categories, if they are supplying certain goods or services, then the department is bound to deduct the TDS. So one thing we have understood, that there must be a contract, the value of which must exceed 2,50,000 rupees. So we will have to deduct the TDS. Now there can be various types of contracts which I can enter with a governmental organization. It can be a contract of supply of goods. I have to supply, say, stationery items. I have to supply air conditioners. Or there can be a supply of services contract. I have to provide them an AMC, annual maintenance services of say software or their hardware, or I have to provide them audit services. As an auditor, I am providing them audit services. So that can be a contract, or it can be a supply of goods plus services, a composite supply, a works contract, or a contract in which both goods and services are applicable. So whether TDS is to be deducted on all these categories, goods, services, and a composite contract, yes, sir. We have to deduct TDS in all these categories. There is no distinction as regards whether it is a supply of goods, only then the TDS will be deducted, or a supply of services, only then. Irrespective of the nature of contract, if the value is more than 2,50,000 rupees, then you have to deduct the TDS. Under the erstwhile laws, that is the VAT and service tax regime, there was no concept of TDS under service tax regime. But under VAT regime, if we were doing some composite services, that is a works contract, then we had a concept of TDS. So in the earlier regime, TDS was applicable only on these categories of contracts. There was no TDS on supply of goods, which are purely supply of goods, no TDS on purely supply of services. But the TDS was applicable on supply of goods plus services, which was commonly referred to as WCT. WCT deducted, works contract tax deducted by the department or the relevant organization. So bringing it down, summarizing it, tax deduction is applicable under GST for any supply, irrespective of its nature. The only condition that has to be checked is the amount. It should exceed 2,50,000 rupees. Now, how to calculate the limit of 2,50,000 rupees? Let us take some illustrations. There is a contract. I am a supplier. I am entering into a contract with one of the ministries. They allotted me a contract 1, which was for 10 lakh rupees. They allotted me contract 2, which was for 1 lakh rupees. So, pehla contract 10 lakh ka, dusra contract 1 lakh ka, and the third contract was for 2 lakh rupees. So I was allotted 3 contracts. It can be on a same day, same week, same month, or a same year. Irrespective of that, I was allotted 3 contracts. The total of these contracts is 13 lakh rupees. So now, since the aggregate value of contracts have exceeded 2.5 lakh rupees, am I required to deduct TDS on the payments of each of these 3 contracts, be it contract 1, 2, or 3? No, sir. The basic aspect is that TDS has to be deducted at a contract level. So the total contract value you just ignore. The total of all the contract values you have to ignore. We will have to see individual contracts. Contract number 1, whether the value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees, yes. So I will be liable to deduct TDS. Contract 2, whether the value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees, no. So no TDS is required to be deducted. Contract 3, whether the value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees, no. So no TDS will be deducted. So we don't have to accumulate or total or aggregate the values of all contracts in hand. Each contract will be a separate contract, and on the basis of that, we will be deducting the TDS. This is another major shift from the income tax provision. Under income tax, once a person is under the ambit of TDS, then his TDS is deducted irrespective of the contract value. But here, every time you have to see whether the payment is made for a contract which the value of which exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees. If yes, only then the TDS will be deducted. So in this particular situation, only in the contract 1, we will be deducting the TDS. In all other cases, no TDS will be deducted. Another aspect, another illustration rather. So there is a supply of goods contract, 2.25 lakh rupees. I charge GST at the rate of 12%, and the total GST is 40,500. The total invoice value is 2,65,500. This is case one, in which I have a supply of 2.25 lakh rupees, which is less than 2.5 lakh. But when GST is added to that particular amount, the total value goes past 2.5 lakh rupees. Another case, this time it is a supply which is exempted. The total value is 3.25 lakh rupees. GST on that is exempted. The total invoice value is 3.25 lakh rupees. And there is another case in which the supply of goods value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees, 3.25. GST at the rate of 18% is 58,500, and the total value is 383,500. In these three cases, when and where the TDS will be applicable? Let us first start with case number 3, whether we will be liable to deduct TDS on this particular contract. In this case, even the taxable value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees. So yes, in this case, TDS is for sure to be deducted. No confusion, TDS has to be deducted. Now, talking about case 2, whether I am required to deduct TDS if I am doing exempt supply. I am supplying exempt goods to the government organization, agency, or a department, or a PSU. Whether they are still required to deduct my TDS. The objective under GST is to ensure that the GST tax is collected beforehand, or in case there is no and the second objective is to ensure that there is an audit trail. If I am dealing in exempt commodities, the government does not earn anything. The government does not get any revenue. So the government have actually specified it that you are not required to deduct TDS on exempt supply. So if I am dealing in exempt supply, there is no question of GST collection. When there is no question of GST collection, why we should complicate and take additional taxes and then go back and refund those taxes to the relevant taxpayer? So they said no tax deduction is required in case of exempt supply. Now comes case number 1. What will be the situation over here? Before GST, the amount is less than 2.5 lakh rupees. After GST, it goes past 2,50,000 rupees. So the provision says that TDS has to be deducted considering the taxable value. In this case, the taxable value is less than 2.5 lakh rupees. So no TDS to be deducted. Sir, we have only discussed the aspect when TDS will not be deducted or it will be deducted. What is the value on which TDS has to be deducted? We will be discussing in the next slide. In this particular slide, what we understood is that if my taxable value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees, only then I will be required to deduct TDS. Otherwise, I will not be required to deduct TDS. Another illustration. Here, the supply of goods value is 3.25 lakh rupees. GST is 58,500. The total value is 3,83,500. The total contract value is 3,83,500 rupees. Now the issue in this illustration is what is the value on which I have to deduct TDS? So there can be two possible options. 3,25,000, that is the basic value, or 3,83,500, which is the gross value. So in this scenario, on what amount TDS has to be deducted? So again, the very objective is to collect TDS on a taxable value. So the TDS will be deducted not on the gross value, but on the taxable value. So whatever is the taxable value, I will be deducting TDS on that particular amount. Now there can be a query. Sir, my total contract is for 325 plus GST, 58,500. Total value is 383,500. I have been awarded this contract. Now they will be paying me a mobilization advance. Those who are dealing with these kind of taxpayers, they understand that generally the government department gives a mobilization advance. That my mobilization advance is 25,000 rupees. So whether while paying that mobilization advance, they are required to deduct TDS. Yes, sir. The contract value should exceed 2.5 lakh rupees. And once the value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees, the TDS has to be deducted at the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier. So since they are paying an advance amount of 25,000 rupees, they will be required to deduct TDS. And now the issue arises. In 25,000, they will have to reverse calculate. They will have to reverse calculate what is the taxable amount, what is the tax amount, and then deduct TDS on the taxable portion, not the gross portion, that is 25,000 rupees. They will have to reverse calculate and then calculate what is the taxable value and then deduct the TDS amount. Another illustration. Supply of goods is 3.25 lakh rupees. GST on it is 58,500. I also have made some exempt supplies. The total value is 483,500. Same issue. What is the value on which TDS will be applicable? 325, 483 or 425? Again, sir, forget about GST. Forget exempt supplies. What is the total taxable supplies? 3.25 lakh rupees. So TDS will be deducted on 3.25 lakh rupees. Very simple. You have to deduct TDS only on the taxable value. Forget any other item added in that invoice. You just have to concentrate on the taxable value and deduct TDS thereupon. So I was first classified in one of those 6 categories. So I was liable to obtain registration. I obtained the registration. Then I checked that I am required to deduct TDS or not. I identified a contract on which I am required to deduct the TDS. I also identified the value on which I am required to deduct the TDS. Now the issue arises, what is the rate at which TDS has to be deducted? And the rate is, in case of intrastate supplies, 1% each under CGST and SGST. So if it is an intrastate supplies, 1% dono jagah pe, and if it is an interstate supplies, 2% under IGST. So effectively the tax rate is 2% only, 1% under C and S and 2% under IGST. So total value, for example, in the previous slide, the value on which TDS is to be deducted is 3,25,000 rupees. So 2% of 3.25 will be the TDS amount that will be deducted and remitted to the government organization. Now, there is an exception given to this entire transaction. The government has notified or specified a category or a supply transaction on which TDS is not required to be deducted. The statement is like, no deduction shall be made if the location of the supplier and the place of supply is in a state or UT, which is different from a state, or as the case may be UT, this and that. I'm ignoring this. Let us start practically. There are 3 aspects: location of supplier, place of supply, location of recipient. In case number 1, let us take first scenario. Location of supplier Delhi. I am a supplier. I am located in Delhi. The product or the services that I am supplying, and as per the place of supply provisions, the place of supply comes out to be Delhi. And recipient is also located in Delhi. So all the 3 items, location, place, and location of recipient, all 3 are in Delhi. Now let us start with the analysis. When the location of supplier and place of supply both are in Delhi, as a supplier, what will I charge? I will charge CGST and Delhi SGST. Mark my word, Delhi SGST. Because I will be collecting taxes for Delhi department, for Delhi SGST department, and I will be remitting that to the Delhi state government. And the recipient is located in Delhi. He has obtained TDS registration with the Department of Delhi. Will he be able to deduct CGST and Delhi SGST? Yes. So in this case, there is no problem. Let us take a second scenario. Location of supplier Delhi. Place of supply UP. Location of recipient UP. So a UP department asked me to supply, say, mobile phones or laptops to their particular organization. I supplied them, and since it is an interstate supplies, I charge IGST. Because I am sitting in Delhi, I am supplying those goods to a place in UP, and the place of supply is UP. Since location of supplier and place of supplier are in two different states, I charge IGST. The recipient who is required to deduct the TDS, the recipient who is required to deduct the TDS is also located in UP. And in this particular transaction, which tax he will be deducting? He will be deducting IGST. Is it possible for him to deduct IGST? Yes, it is possible for him to deduct the IGST. So no issue in this case study also. Now let us take the third case study. Location of supplier, Delhi. Place of supply, Delhi. Location of recipient, UP. So there was say an event which was going in Delhi for UP department, for any of the UP or any organization or ministry which was located in UP, but they were having an organization in Delhi or having an event in Delhi, or they wanted some goods to be supplied in Delhi. And on the basis of place of supply provisions, the location came out to be Delhi. In this situation, I as a supplier will charge, because I am in Delhi and the place of supply is in Delhi, what will I charge? I will charge CGST plus Delhi SGST. I will be charging SGST for the Delhi government and remitting that amount to the Delhi government. And where is the recipient located? The recipient is located in UP. What can he now deduct? Delhi SGST. Sitting in UP, he can deduct UP SGST. He can deduct SGST charge under the UP Act and then remit it back to the UP government. Here, if he deducts this SGST amount, can he remit it to the Delhi department? No. यहाँ पे बैठ के यूपी में बैठ के जब वो SGST डिडक्ट करेगा तो उसकी रजिस्ट्रेशन में जब भी वो SGST डिपॉजिट करेगा, दैट अमाउंट विल गो टू यूपी डिपार्टमेंट. And now UP department will not give any credit to the tax deductor, or the Delhi department will not give any TDS credit to the supplier. It will say मेरे पास तो कोई tax ही नहीं आया. So considering this entire situation, because this was not possible, this exception was created in the act itself. Now I am reading this exception again. No deduction shall be made. No deduction shall be made if the location of the supplier, in our case Delhi, and the place of supply, that is also Delhi, is in a state or UT. They both are in a state or a UT which is different from the state, or as the case may be, UT of the recipient who is required to deduct TDS. So location and place are in a different state. Location of recipient or tax collector is in a different state. Since it is practically not possible for that recipient to collect TCS of a different state, the government has given a relaxation upfront that in this particular scenario, no TDS is required to be deducted. So there is only one exception. When the location and place, or in simple words, I should say, if there is an intrastate transaction, this is an intrastate transaction. In case of an intrastate transaction, then TDS will be deducted if the recipient is also located in that particular state. And if the recipient is located outside that state, then no TDS is to be deducted. So what now we have discussed? Who is required to register? When he is required to deduct the TDS? What is the value on which he is required to deduct the TDS? What is the rate of TDS? And the only exception when no TDS is required to be deducted. Moving forward, we have done the two aspects, obtained the registration and deduct TDS. Now two things are left: depositing of TDS and issuing of a certificate. Again, these two steps are very simple. So for the month of April, I will be depositing the TDS. I will be depositing the TDS within 10 days for April 10th of May, May 10th of June, June 10th of July. By 10th of the succeeding month, we will have to file the return in form GSTR 7. And while filing that form, I will be also depositing the taxes. So through GSTR 7, I will be depositing the taxes, and I will be issuing the certificate in form GSTR 7A within 5 days of submission of my GSTR 7. तो 7 फाइल होने के within 5 days I have to issue the TDS certificate, and in case I do not issue, then there are certain penalties for non-complying with the provision. So I'm now concluding the entire topic. Going back to the previous slide, who is required to obtain the registration? There are 6 persons who are required to obtain the registration. Any ministry, establishment or department of the central government or state government, any local authority, any governmental agency, any board or establishment in which the government has 51% controlling right, any society which is formed by the central government or the state government, and lastly a PSU. So who has to obtain registration? There are 6 categories who have to obtain the registration. Then when they are required to deduct the TDS, when an individual contract exceeds the total amount of 2.5 lakh rupees, and 2.5 lakh here means taxable supplies. It does not include taxes. It does not include the value of exempt supplies. The third aspect is, what is the rate of TDS? The rate of TDS is 2%, 1% under CGST and SGST each, or 2% under IGST. There is only one exception. There is only one exception when TDS is not required to be deducted, when the tax collector is located in a different state and SGST of a different act is being charged. Then no TCS is required to be deducted. Then after deducting, I will have to pay these taxes through GSTR 7 by the 10th of next month. And after filing my GSTR 7, I have to issue the TDS certificate in form GSTR 7A. At this particular stage, all the compliances in regards to the deductee or deductor are complete. So the deductor has done everything. He has obtained registration, deducted the amount, deposited the amount, issued the TDS certificate. Now comes, what is the, I'm going to the last step. What will the deductee do? Now his amount has been deducted. Now what will happen? In this particular scenario, what will happen is that the amount deducted as TDS will now be communicated or will be available electronically on his portal. So if I am the person whose TDS has been deducted, I was the supplier, my TDS has been deducted. So that amount will be reflected on my portal that this much amount has been deducted by XYZ department. I will accept those amounts. And once I accept those amounts, it will be credited to my cash ledger, not the credit ledger. Once I accept those amounts, that amount will be credited to my cash ledger. So after the amount is credited to my cash ledger, I will be utilizing it for my payment of taxes. And in case the entire payment cannot be done, I can also claim the refund of my cash ledger balances. Now there are certain consequences of default in these compliance. If I do not deduct TDS, then I will be liable to pay the TDS amount as well as interest at the rate of 18%. Similar to Income Tax Act, so you will be required to first pay the TDS amount and also required to pay the interest amount. In case I do not issue the certificate, within the prescribed period of 5 days, then penalty of ₹100 per day in each act, effectively 200 rupees per day, subject to a maximum of 5,000 in each act. So effectively 10,000 rupees. So issuing a TDS certificate is also very important. Otherwise, you will be having a penalty of 10,000 rupees within 20 days itself. Sorry, 200 per day into 10,000 is the maximum cap in 50 days. Sorry. If I do not pay TDS, I have deducted the TDS, but I have not paid. I am paying it on say 15th, 16th, 18th, 20th. Then interest at the rate of 18% will be applicable. And similarly, if I do not file my TDS return, then the penalty of ₹100 per day under each act, effectively 200, subject to a maximum of ₹10,000 under both the act will be applicable. So in this particular scenario, we have 4 defaults that can be done. TDS not deducted, so I will be liable to pay the TDS and interest. TDS deducted but not deposited, I will be liable to pay again the TDS amount as well as the interest amount. Third, interest is at the rate of 18%. I am filing my TDS return with the default with the delay, then ₹200 per day subject to a maximum of 10,000 rupees. I have issued the TDS certificate or I have not issued the TDS certificate, then the penalty will again be 200 per day, subject to a maximum of 10,000 rupees. Now there can be a situation wherein excess TDS has been deducted. I had 3 contracts with the government. One contract was for 10 lakh rupees, TDS was required to be deducted. Second contract was for 10 lakh rupees, TDS was required to be deducted. The third contract was for only 1 lakh rupees. But by mistake, they deducted TDS even on the third contract. Then what can be done? So there are 2 possible options under this refund mechanism. They say if it has been identified that excess TDS has been deducted and the deductor has not yet passed on that amount to the deductee. मैंने deduct तो कर लिया 21 लाख पे, 10 plus 10 plus 1 पे, मुझे करना था 20 लाख पे. I have deducted the TDS on 21 lakh rupees instead of 20 lakh rupees. So if I have submitted my GSTR7 with 21 lakh rupees, the amount has already been passed on to the recipient, that is to the supplier, then the refund will be claimed by the supplier. That is, if I am the supplier, then I will be able to claim that refund, or you can even adjust it with your normal liabilities. But if you want to claim the refund, then the only person who can claim the refund is the supplier. But in case the remitted amount in GSTR7 was only 20 lakh rupees, I deducted on 21, I deposited it on 21, but in GSTR7, while filing GSTR7, I recognized that TDS was required to be deducted only on 20 lakh rupees. I remitted the transaction of 20 lakh rupees. 1 lakh is lying with the department in their cash ledger balances. Then even the department can claim the refund. So both deductor and deductee can claim the refund under these provisions in case there is an excess deduction of TDS. In case the amount is lying in the cash ledger of the deductor will claim. In case it is lying in the cash ledger of deductee, then the deductee will claim. So जिसके पास balance है वो claim कर सकता है. There is no restriction that this TDS cannot be refunded. This we have already done. It will be for deductee, it will be made available electronically. Deductee has to accept the amount, and lastly, after accepting the amount, will be credited to the cash ledger. So with this, we complete with our TDS provisions. Just a second. Collection of tax at source. With this, we have completed our TDS provision. Now we are moving on to the second part of our discussion, that is collection at source. Who is required to collect TCS? Under TDS was required to be collected by governmental organization. But in TCS, who is required to collect TCS? Only a specific category of persons are required to collect TCS. And who are those categories? It is every electronics commerce operator. So every electronics commerce operator is required to collect TCS. Now, who is an ECO? Electronics commerce operator. So ECO is a person who is defined in the act, who owns, operates, manages any digital or electronic platform. So either I own, or I operate, or I manage digitally or electronically any platform for the purposes of e-commerce. So either I own, I operate, or I manage an e-commerce platform for e-commerce, a platform for e-commerce, then I am an e-commerce operator. And the illustration or the examples of these are Amazon, Flipkart, eBay, etc. Now the issue arises, who is an e-commerce operator? What is e-commerce? What is electronics commerce? So e-commerce operator is a person who has a platform. E-commerce operator कौन है? जिसके पास एक platform है. वो platform चाहे वो own करता है, manage करता है या operate करता है. So is a platform which is owned or managed or operated by that particular person. And lastly, And lastly, for e-commerce. Now, what is e-commerce? E-commerce is very simple. E-commerce means supply of goods or services, including digital products over a digital or electronic network. So if I am able to supply goods, I am able to supply services through a platform, through an electronic or a digital network, then it is referred to as e-commerce. So these particular categories owns, operates, or manages. So if Amazon is providing me a platform to sell my goods, then it becomes the e-commerce operator, because he's giving me a platform from where I can sell my goods or I can sell my services. Case 1. Now let us understand it with some illustration. So e-commerce is required to collect TCS, but there can be multiple cases. Case 1, there is a digital platform. I have registered on that platform as a supplier. You have placed an order as a customer. In this situation, we both are dealing through a digital platform. Then TCS will be applicable. So this digital platform will be required to deduct TCS. Case 2, I have a digital platform, but that platform is only for my services, my goods, my products, and the customer is directly linking with me. There is no third party involved. In this case, TCS will not be applicable. Even though I am an e-commerce operator, I am owning a platform through which I am selling my own goods. But in this case, I cannot deduct TCS of my own. I cannot collect tax for myself. So in this case, TCS will not be applicable. So if say XYZ, a Titan is selling their watches online, or say LG is selling their mobile phones or their laptops online, in all these situations, TCS will not be applicable. Rate at which TCS is to be deducted. What is the rate at which TCS is to be deducted? So an e-commerce is required to deduct TCS, but there is a particular rate at which TCS is to be deducted. In TDS, the rate was 0.5, or TDS, the rate was 2%. In TCS, the rate is 1%. 0.5% under SGST and CGST, and 1% under the IGST. So TDS was deducted at the rate of 2%, TCS at the rate of 1%, 0.5% under the each act. Now the issue arises. I am an e-commerce operator. I know at what rate I have to deduct the TCS. Now the issue arises, amount on which TCS is to be deducted or collected. So it has to be deducted on the net value of taxable supplies. And what does net value of taxable supply means? It means total supplies made during that month through a particular platform. Total supplies made during the month through a particular platform minus, reduce from there on, the reverse, the sales return through that particular platform during the month. So sales minus sales return in a particular month will give me the net taxable value on which I am required to deduct the TCS. Let us understand it with some examples. So I made an intrastate supply of 20,000 rupees. I made interstate supplies of 60,000 rupees. Total amount for TCS purposes was 80,000 rupees. 20 intra, 60 inter, and total is 80,000 rupees. So TCS will be deducted on 80,000 rupees. In another example, my taxable supplies intra-state were 20,000, exempt were 5,000. Inters were taxable was 60, exempt 25. So intra के अंदर effective sale हुई 25, 20 taxable, 5 exempt. Inter में 60 taxable, 25 exempt. What will be the amount for TCS? Whether the government has to collect any tax on exempt supplies? No, there is no requirement. When the supply itself is exempted, there is no question of TDS or TCS. So even in this case, we have to ignore the exempt values. मैं exempt values ignore कर गया. Intra का 20, inter का 60, total value on which TCS is to be deducted 80,000 rupees. Matter closed. Another case study. Total supplies during the month was 20,000 rupees. There was sales return worth rupees 10,000. Inter 60,000 total, 20,000 return. So my effective intra is 10,000. Effective inter is 40,000. 10 plus 40, amount for TCS will be 50,000 rupees. Amount for TCS will be 50,000 rupees. Another illustration. Taxable during the month was 20,000 rupees, but there was a sales return of 30,000 rupees. Previous month का भी return इसी month में आ गया. So my effective supply value is minus 10,000 for intrastate supply. Minus 10,000 for intrastate supply. Interstate supply is 60 minus 20, 40. In this case, no TCS on intrastate supplies. Negative figure ko we have to ignore. We have to ignore the negative figure. So there is no TCS on negative figure, that is intrastate in this case. And for interstate, I will be deducting 40,000 rupees. Since we have three different statutes, IGST Act, CGST Act, and SGST Act. So I have to read the provisions individually. So when I reduce sales minus sales return, it has to be under the specific category. Intra का intra नहीं होगा. 20 minus 30 minus 10. मैं आपको TCS वापसी तो नहीं करूंगा. So government will not collect any TCS. The government asks ECO not to collect any amount. तो यहाँ पे उसको सिर्फ जो है कुछ टैक्स कलेक्ट नहीं करना, यहाँ पे वो रिटर्न करेगा. The minus figure of 10,000 cannot be adjusted with interstate supply. The negative figure cannot be adjusted with interstate supplies because वहां पे IGST की collection है. That is a different act, different statute, different state will be getting the revenue. Here the revenue, the states getting the revenue are different. So they have disintegrated that we have to see taxable and returns in the inter and intra basis. In case intra is negative, we have to ignore. In case inter is negative, we will again ignore. We will have to take only the positive value for deducting the TCS. And this negative cannot be adjusted in the future period. इस महीने minus 10,000 आया, that does not mean I will have an matter closed, no TCS for the particular month. Next month, fresh figure, sales minus sales return. Not applicable. So again, mandatory without any supply value. Even if you have only one client, one supply during the month, or you have 100 supplies, as an e-commerce operator, you have to compulsory register on the platform. Similarly, the persons who are supplying their goods to an e-commerce operator are also required to register themselves irrespective of the value of supply made by them. So, मैं एक e-commerce है, Amazon है. If I want to deal on Amazon, I have to compulsory register myself. If I am not registered, then I cannot deal with an e-commerce operator because the entire mechanism comes to a standstill. Now let us understand another aspects of registration itself in TCS. Location of supply Delhi, place of supply Delhi, TCS tax collector is located in Delhi. Tax collector is located in Delhi. What will I as a supplier will charge CGST and SGST in this particular scenario? The tax collector, since it is registered in Delhi, it can also collect CGST and SGST, so it is applicable. So this transaction can be completed. There is no additional requirement or any exception given. Another illustration, supplier in Delhi, place of supply UP. TCS is located in Delhi. Tax collector is located in Delhi. As a supplier, I will charge IGST. As a supplier, I will charge IGST because place of supply and location are in two different states. I charge IGST. Then, as a tax collector, I am sitting in Delhi. I can collect IGST. No issues. So problem solved. I can collect IGST over here also. Third illustration. Location of supplier Delhi. Place of supplier Delhi. TCS is now located in UP. Since both supplier and place of supply are in Delhi, I will charge CGST and Delhi SGST. But sitting in UP, I cannot collect Delhi SGST. It is not possible. I cannot collect Delhi SGST since it is not possible. Just a minute. I'm in a meeting. Sorry guys, I have a fake account, so I have been intimated that there are certain queries being made for payment in my name. So I was receiving certain calls also. Sorry for the interruption. Location of supplier Delhi, place of supplier Delhi. The total taxes charged over here are CGST plus Delhi SGST. If I am a tax collector located in Delhi, if I am a tax collector located in UP, then sitting in UP, I cannot deduct or collect taxes of Delhi. So in this particular scenario, this position was not possible. Under TDS, they gave an exception. Under TDS, they gave an exception. Then in that particular scenario, no TDS is to be deducted. But under the TCS provision, there is no exception. There is no exception. So this UP person has to deduct TDS, has to collect TCS. This UP person has to collect TCS. But sitting in UP, he cannot collect Delhi SGST. So what will he have to do now? Then he will have to obtain a registration in Delhi. In simple words, a tax collector, an electronics commerce operator who is required to collect TCS is mandatorily required to obtain registration in each of the states, in which his suppliers or the vendor supplying through his platform are registered. So in simple words, TCS registration is applicable in all the states. If I have my vendors in 25 states, I will have to mandatorily obtain. Now the issue arises, sir, I don't have any physical presence in 24 states. I am located in one particular state. Then the head office will be declared as the place of business, and you will, once you select e-commerce operator, even the department understand that you may not have a physical presence. So they have given an administrative jurisdiction at one particular department. All the application of ECO of a state goes to that particular department, and they approve those registrations. At the inception, it was difficult. The department was always asking for a physical presence. But there were representation made by all the e-commerce operators that how can we have an offices in all the 25 states when we are located in 1, 2, or 3 states where we have our warehouses. So the government relaxed this provision, asked that only and only if, you have to obtain the registration, but the address can be your head office. No need to obtain separate place of business in that particular state. So the only thumb rule or only the thunder line over here is that registration is must in all these states. So in simple words, I am Amazon, I am Flipkart, I am eBay, I am Home Shop, I am Shop CJ Network, XYZ. You will have 20 registrations, 25 registration, 28 registration. We have a case in which we have 31 registration. So we have registration in all these states. We have tried deliberating or giving the aspect to the government that they should come out with a simpler provision that sitting in one state, I'm able to deduct the TCS of all the states. Just give me an option that I write in a particular statement itself that this is the amount of TCS of that particular state. But they have denied that it is not possible in the given GST frame, not the GST law frame, GSTN frame, the network, the portal I am talking about, that it is not possible in the portal, because it will take another 2 years, 3 years to get all these amendments. So having said so, today a TCS, an e-commerce operator, is required to obtain registration in all these states. Now what has to be done after collection of TDS? I will be submitting, it will be TCS. So I will submit that TCS with the department in form GSTR 8, and the due date is by the 10th of the succeeding month. Another important point, that every e-commerce operator is required to file an annual return. Very interesting, na, sir? The provision is applicable from 1st October 2018. 1st October 2018. Effectively, 18-19 was the first year, and the due date was 31st of December 2019. Already elapsed. 18-19 की due date चली गई है. 19-20 the due date is standing 15-20 days away. 31st December. And the form GSTR 9B is not yet notified. The form is not notified. The due dates have already passed, and none of us understand that this is the compliance that is already lying. We have already intimated some of our, we have only 2 clients in ECO. We have already intimated, be prepared for this form. It can come any day. When the department realizes that they have an annual return even for an e-commerce operator, then you will be required to file 2 years, 3 years, until and unless they exempt it otherwise, which is the possible option available as of now. Asking me to file TCS annual return for 2 years or 3 years will be again very time consuming, since it is not one annual return that I have to file. I have already said I will have 20 registration, 25 registration, 30 registration. So technically, if you are asking me to file annual return for 2 consecutive years, you are asking me to file 60 annual returns. So which is a very hectic task. Secondly, the important criteria to collect TCS is not when the payment is actually received, it is the period of sale. So if I have supplied certain goods in October month, the payment of which is received or credited to the supplier in the month of say November, December, January, irrespective of that, tax is to be collected in the month of October. In case there is a delay, I do not file my TCS amount collected as TCS by 10, then interest will be payable. And lastly, there can be multiple chain of ECOs also. Let us take an example. There is a website known as Trivago, from where I can book the hotels. And assuming Trivago is linked with another website, say XYZ, which is also a consolidator. And XYZ is actually dealing with Radisson Blu, which is the hotel for which I have booked the room. So I interacted with Trivago. Trivago interacted with XYZ. XYZ interacted with supplier, that is the hotel person. Then who is required to collect the TCS? The entire frame, what is to be understood is that TCS is to be collected for the supplier, that is hotel person. Hotel person will be getting some revenues. TCS has to be collected for that hotel person. And the person, the ECO who is directly connected with ECO, with hotel, will be required to collect the TCS. So TCS in this case will be collected by the operator who is connected directly with the hotel and not the person who is connected with the customer. तो जो कस्टमर के साथ ट्रिवागो था उसको कुछ नहीं करना, ट्रिवागो जब आगे XYZ के साथ कर रहा है वहां पे कुछ नहीं होगा, XYZ जब होटल को पेमेंट कर रहा है तब उसको टैक्स वहां पे कलेक्ट करना है. इश्यूज एट द एंड ऑफ द सप्लायर बहुत सिंपल है. अमाउंट अगेन TDS की तरह ये भी इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली अवेलेबल होगी. यू हैव टू एक्सेप्ट द सेम अमाउंट, विल गो बैक टू योर कैश लेजर्स एंड वंस द अमाउंट इज क्रेडिटेड टू योर कैश लेजर्स यू कैन पे योर टैक्सेस और यू कैन क्लेम द रिफंड if the amount is very in excess. With this, I close my session. Thank you for your patient hearing. And now we can take the queries if we have. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Tarun ji, for such a wonderful deliberation. Really so nice. So I think you have covered almost all the aspects. And one thing I want to just share with all of you, nowadays it's the trend that people are doing the fake accounts and they ask for the payments. So my request to all of you, please don't make any payment unless and until आप उनसे बात कर लें. अभी जैसे तरुण जी के साथ भी हुआ है, किसी ने उनका फेक अकाउंट बना दिया है, तो आई थिंक he might be disturbed. तो we'll take few queries. एक प्रोवाइजोस इन सेक्शन 51(1) काफी लोग पूछ रहे हैं तरुण जी.
Sorry. Please give example of government agencies, one of the notified person in 51(1). So 51(1) governmental agencies are, you can say, any agency, for example, CBI. I don't know whether it is an agency or not, but any organization which is directly controlled by the government, but it is not recognized as such as a board, it is not recognized as such as a local authority or any other organization, but it is completely under the control of the government. It is referred to as a governmental agency.
Okay.
Sir, again, it will depend whether that private university is the 51, who have the 51% or more of the controlling right. If that 51% or more of the controlling right is with the department or with the state government, then definitely they will be covered in this obligation. And once the control is not with the state government, it is with the relevant university itself, then no TDS will be deducted.
Okay.
So no, sir. For example, if I am making a provision in my books of account, then no TDS has to be deducted. But once I am crediting the amount or I am crediting the payment, then only I have to book the. मैं जब अपना expenditure debit करता हूँ, तो I create a liability. To remove that liability, either I pay or I adjust it with some XYZ thing. So when I make an adjustment, only then the TDS will be deducted. Sir, interstate supply applicability on what? TDS provisions or TCS provision? Please specify.
Okay. ये तो ऑलरेडी वी हैव
मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ डिफेंस हो गया, आपकी दिल्ली जल बोर्ड हो गया, सीबीएसई हो गया, एनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ गवर्नमेंट हैज टू डिडक्ट. सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट होगी, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट होगी, पीएसयू हो गए, आप पीएसयू ऑडिट करने जा रहे हो, आपका टीडीएस डिडक्ट होगा. So TCS by ECU has to be at GST and wise or total supply by ECU on a month minus return. Sir, I have already said, जितने suppliers जिस location पे located है. For example, I am a supplier who is located in Delhi and UP. So for my Delhi transactions, the ECO will have to obtain registration in Delhi. So Delhi वाला Delhi को deal करेगा. For my UP transaction, again ECO will be registered at UP. So UP वाला UP में करेगा. Automatically it is a GSTN level. So every registration is separate and every electronics commerce operator linked with that supplier will be separate. So दोनों separate होंगे तो automatically उसके अंदर GSTN level हो जाता है. You don't have to calculate at GSTN level. हम लोगों ने अपने क्लाइंट को क्या एडवाइस किया हुआ है, that जो स्टार्टिंग के 2 डिजिट्स हैं 07 वो आप आइडेंटिफाई कर लीजिए, वो सारे वेंडर्स को टैग कर दीजिए एक पर्टिकुलर अपने TCS नंबर के साथ. 06 को अपने 06 के साथ टैग कर दीजिए. ऑटोमेटिकली इट बिकम्स एट GSTN लेवल.
Okay. Let's take the last query regarding the TDS return. I think you have covered this.
So how is TDS return? I couldn't
Complete,
again.
that's what I'm saying. Not complete the query. Okay. I think you have covered almost all the queries. PPT Tarun ji share kar denge and will post in the comment box. You can download from there. So my sincere thanks to Tarun ji for such a wonderful deliberation and covering all the aspects relating to TDS and TCS, either it's a legal aspects or the return aspects and the registration aspects. So my sincere thanks and a big round of applause for Tarun ji. And my sincere thanks to all of you for watching this video. Till then, wait for our next webinar on the next week on Saturday and Sunday. Till then, bye bye. Take care. And Tarunji, once again, my sincere thanks to you.
Thank you.
Don't worry, everything will be all right. Don't worry.
No, actually, sir, there were so many messages flooding my sister.
Yes, I can understand. Yes. So please take care of that. Yes, thank you.
Okay.